Strap in because we have got a lot of procrastinating to cover. Listen, I have had quite the reading journey since I last updated you in May, and I was going to do just an August recap now that I'm feeling a little bit back to my normal reading self, but I was like, you know what? I don't want to miss talking about these books, and I feel like in order to appreciate where we're at now, you have to go on the journey with me that has been this summer of the reading slump, the slump of the slumps, and the desperation to try to find another 5-star because I had not read one since May. Also, my cats decided to get the super zoomies right when I decided to sit down and film, so if you hear them, just know they're living their best life. I found a kitty under my porch a couple of months ago. Her name is Willow. If she comes over here, I'll show you. If not, I'll insert some cute pictures of her. Since this isn't a monthly recap, it's like a quarterly recap, an entire season, let's just go ahead and get into it. Otherwise I could sit here and ramble on for hours. In order to start our journey, we have to talk about where all of this started. What I have read since I updated you last in my recaps. I think I might be missing some things, but it's fine. And that would be the Raven Cycle. I read this, it feels like a whole lifetime ago. I was going to the Taylor Swift concert in Tampa. That was the first Eras Tour concert that I went to. That is when I was reading this. When I went to go visit my dad, and absolutely just fell in love with this entire series. And this is what started the reading slump, which I'm not complaining about because I didn't expect to love these. I almost DNF'd the first book because I could not keep straight like who every character was, and I wasn't sure if it was gonna be for me. I'm so glad that I kept going. Oh my god, this just took me by storm. I didn't know much about it going into it other than like what you could read on the back of the synopsis, which is like, we have Blue, our main character. She meets these Raven boys who are these boys that go to this like private school in her town. She lives with psychics, but the only like little detail they've ever been able to give her about her life is that she is going to like kiss the person that she loves and then they're gonna die. Cool. And then it kind of all just spirals from there. I love the characters. Yes, the plot was great, but honestly, it was characters and vibes, and I loved this so much. Ronan Lynch is my favorite character of all time. I'm so glad that I read this series, but I loved it so much that it took me a while to read the last book because I just kept not wanting to pick it up because I got so sad that it was ending that I would read a couple of pages and then have to stop because I'd cry. I'm never gonna be able to read this again for the first time, right? Like, I know I can go back and reread this, but I'm never going to be able to experience this for the first time. And that made me so sad. And then it made me sad because I was like, what if I've peaked? What if this is it? What if it doesn't get any better than this for me? And I was trying not to put that energy out into the world, but let me tell ya, it was looking bleak there for a little bit, okay? So all of those that gave 5 stars, I think technically on Storygraph I gave the first book 4.5, but I said with the caveat that like most books in a series, the first book I don't rate it a 5-star because I need more time to fall in love with the characters. And my experience with it now as a whole is 5-star. I did not find another 5-star read until very recently, and it was not for lack of trying, let me tell you. So in the middle of finishing out the Raven Cycle, I did pick up the Writing Retreat. You'll see a theme in here, which is that when I did convince myself to read, it was usually because of Kayla's book club. But the Writing Retreat overall, I think I gave this like 4 stars. Let me stop telling you what I think I gave it and let me just look it up. 4 stars. This is following, okay, let me tell you, I can barely remember main characters literally right after I've read the book. Nonetheless, a book that I read like 4 months ago, okay? So we're just gonna have to roll with it. Oh, Alex. Her name is almost mine and I still didn't remember her name. Cool. So this is a thriller where we're following Alex, who is invited to go on this writing retreat where like it's hosted by one of her favorite authors. It's basically a chance to like sit, I think it's like an 8-week program. You go to her house and you write an entire book, and then whoever's book she thinks is the best, you win this like publishing deal and a lot of money and stuff. But you're competing against other people, including Alex is competing against her like ex-best friend. And this is Unhinged, which is my preferred genre of thriller. We have an isolated setting, it's snowy, it's cold. You're very unsettled from the beginning of like what is going on at this writing retreat. Clearly there's something a little bit more sinister going on, but you don't know quite what's going on. You also have this like, not like haunted house vibe, but there's something else going on with the plot that gives you kind of those haunted, eerie vibes, but this isn't horror, I wouldn't say. This is like thriller. And it goes there. So if you are okay with like just kind of having to suspend some disbelief and just go with the vibe and you just want to have a good time, I would really recommend this. This is one of my most, like, I think thrillers that in my experience, like I would recommend that I have read thus far this year. Then I could feel myself kind of slipping into that reading slump, and I wanted to desperately not have that happen. So I turned back to, I was trying to figure out like, how can I just like finish some books that make me feel good, that make me feel accomplished, that even if they're not necessarily 5 stars, they're books that like I've wanted to read and I know I'm gonna have a good time with. So me and my family went to stay at a cabin for like a few days, and on our way there we stopped at a bookstore, and at the bookstore I got 2 middle grade books. There just like wasn't anything that was really calling to me that wasn't middle grade, and it had been a while since I had read like middle grade books that I've been looking forward to. So I was like, okay, maybe this is my chance. Get into a little bit of like fantasy middle grade, feel that like loving, like I just wanted to recreate those feelings of loving to read. Because even though at this point in time, I hadn't like actually slipped into a slump yet, I thought that was the worst that was to come. If only I knew, okay? I was afraid it was gonna happen and I was trying to prevent that. This is Willow. This is the little kitty, Willow. Hi. She was so small, she was like a pound, anywhere between like 4 and 6 weeks when I first found her. It took me a week to get her inside to like actually get her, but she is just doing so well. So hopefully she just like hangs out. Anyway, back to this. I read Witchlings and Alone. I really liked Witchlings. I was not impressed with Alone. I thought that I was gonna love these both equally. That is not what happened. In this, our main character is 7 and she's really excited because she's getting ready to be not indoctrinated, not indicted, not sorted, but kind of sorted into one of like the houses. This town, everyone is like a witch. You have your little covens that you get placed in, except when you do not. Sometimes, every once in a while, people don't get sorted into a coven. And when that happens, you're like spares. But then on top of being a spare, which is already something that like is looked down upon in the society, she thinks that she's gonna end up in this house with her best friend. That doesn't happen. She doesn't get like sorted, chosen, included in that coven. So she ends up being a spare, but then all of the spares are supposed to have this like magical kind of union that they come into, and that doesn't happen at the ceremony, which is like that's tricky, because when that doesn't happen, they remain witchlings, and if they can't solve this impossible task, they are, am I confusing the plot of this book to something else? Nope, that's it. If they can't solve this impossible task, they're gonna lose their powers. If they lose their powers, it's not good. It's not looking good for our girl 7 and our other friends. This was just so wholesome. The found family vibes is so cute. These feelings of trying to figure out where you belong. Like, it was so relatable of like wanting to fit in with the popular crowd, or having this best friend that you feel like you're gonna be like together forever as you're like it kind of gives me the vibes of like transitioning from middle school to high school kind of thing, and then all of a sudden you're not in like the same classes or the same group, or you're not interested in the same things. But then we also have like, it's deeper than that, right? Like there's a lot more discussions on discrimination than just like high school kind of cliques, but it's that feeling of just trying to figure out where you belong. This was a 4-star. I loved it. I'm excited to read the next book in the series. This was a good time. Alone, I have been looking at for forever, because here's the thing, is that in theory, I love apocalypse books. I love the concept of apocalyptic media. A Quiet Place is my favorite movie of all time, and I don't say that a lot about movies. Movies are just kind of like, yeah, they're good, they're fine. It takes a lot for me to like really love or really hate one. I've watched A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place 2 so many times. Things like Bird Box and like those kind of just like apocalyptic, weird kind of movies and media I love. But every time that I read an apocalypse book, it just doesn't go very well for me, and I don't know what I guess that's not true. Like Leave the World Behind is like one of my favorite books of the year, but that's not really an apocalypse book, is it? Kinda. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Alone. This is written all in prose, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't understand why. It made it a very quick read, but it also made it where like nothing really happened, because there's just not a lot of substance in here. So this is following our main character, Maddie, and she's gonna have a secret sleepover with her friends. Things end up going awry, her friends don't show up, and then while she's at this sleepover, like the world ends, basically. And then she's stuck alone. Everyone was evacuated, and she's just there, and she's having to survive. It's slow, we're really in her head a lot. There are some like kind of gruesome scenes in here that I just didn't understand why they were in here. And like, I love horror, I love weird, gruesome, creepy kind of things. I didn't understand why it was included in here. She does have a dog, so she's not fully alone, but it was something that as I was reading it, I was like, I'm going to instantly forget about this. It just was not what I was hoping for out of like a middle grade apocalyptic story. And you could say that like, yes, it's middle grade and I'm not the target audience, which I totally agree on, but like, I don't feel that way with Witchlings, and I don't feel that way with like a lot of other middle grade that I've read. So I know that with middle grade, you can get deeper, and I can feel really connected to those characters, and it can feel like there are stakes, especially when there's shit happening. But it just did not work for me with Alone. I think I gave that like 2 stars. Then I decided it is time to recreate the magic of like reading an entire fantasy series. Maybe that's what I need to do. I can find my new favorite fantasy series, or one that I really love, because I think I prefer to like bulk consume a fantasy series, like read it from start to end without having like months in between, because it just feels like I'm really immersed in that. And I think that that's what helped so much with the Raven Cycle, is that I read it in this like short period of time while I was at my dad's, and I got to fall in love with the characters, and it was just this experience, this moment. And I thought that I could recreate that with Furyborn, because I had heard Reads with Rachel. I believe that this is one of Reads with Rachel's favorite fantasy series of all time, and I loved the first book. In this, we have 2 different points of view and 2 different timelines. We have Riel, who is an assassin in our, like, what is the present day, but this is set in the past, but like, what is the present day in this world? And then in the past, like, I believe hundreds of years in the past, we're following our other perspective, which is Queen Eliana, and there is this prophecy that talks about like a blood queen and a light queen? Queen of light? Sun queen. The blood queen and the sun queen. And this is all about like female rage and angry women and fantasy, which I just love. And I don't think that either one of these characters are really meant to be likable, but you end up kind of, like, I ended up kind of really loving them because of that, because they're nuanced and complex and they don't always make decisions that you agree with. And you get to see, like, the version of Queen Eliana that we see at the very beginning is very different from the version of Queen Eliana that we get in the main part of this book. And it's kind of like us figuring out, how did she end up there? Like, how did she go from this woman to that? And what about like the world and the people around her kind of turned her into that and made her into this person? Really loved the first book. Wasn't a biggest fan of the second book, and by the third book I DNF'd the series. And at this point in time, I could not tell you anything about what happened in the second book. Not a single thing. I couldn't even really tell you how this book ended. So even though I really loved this first book and I felt really good about how the series was gonna go, by the end I ended up DNFing it. However, I do understand why people love this. And I think that if you're someone who's trying to transition from like YA to adult, but you still want to stay in the YA kind of fantasy genre, I think I could really recommend this series, because there are a lot of adult like themes, and the pacing of it is a little bit more adult, and it doesn't fall into some of the same tropes that some YA fantasy can fall into. Then I read the next Literally Dead book club pick, which was Whisper Down the Lane. I don't have a lot to say about this other than like, it was fine. It was good. This is like set kind of during the Satanic Panic. When was that? 70s? 80s, where people were convinced that adults were rounding up all of these kids for like satanic rituals and sacrifices and stuff. There's a part of this that I can't remember if we decided if it was a spoiler or not. I didn't think it was. Okay, no, because it says in the synopsis. So we technically have 2 points of view, Richard and Sean, but Richard and Sean are the same person. Richard is Richard like in present day in the book as an adult. Sean is who he was as a kid when some things were going down. So Sean, whenever he was 5 years old, was kind of like made to be the catalyst of a lot of like his teachers and people around him getting accused of doing things that didn't actually happen. And I was a little bit worried about where the conversations around this was gonna go, but I think it did a fine job of it. It was a little bit like mystery, thrillery, horror-y, but not really. It was more like a character study on how, again, kind of like what I was just talking about with the last book, like how Sean got to be Richard and what happened and how he blamed himself and who was responsible in those situations and all of the adults that failed him like along the way. The audiobook experience was really good. I really recommend it that way. I read it on audiobook and switched kind of back and forth on ebook. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. It was fine. Oh, maybe it is considered horror? Okay. Then we got so close to a 5 stars. So close. It's so far away with When the Reckoning Comes. This has been one of my like most anticipated horror novellas, question mark? It's 233 pages. I would consider this to be a novella. Our main character, Mira, is a Black woman who like years ago fled her kind of small hometown, and some things happen and we kind of figure out along the way like why she fled and why she hasn't wanted to go back. But during that time, she had like 2 best friends, and she gets a call from her best friend who she hasn't talked to in a while. And she's like, I'm getting married. I want you to be there. This is really important to me. And she's getting married on a plantation, like what used to be a plantation in their hometown. And Mira like is wanting to go and support her friend, but also is like, the fuck? How do you not realize that like this is an issue, that like you're having this celebration on this plantation that like does reenactments for people who like can come through and watch? Okay, it's fucked. But Mira also had this falling out with her friend Jessie, who was kind of like, they were all like a little 3 group. Something happened to her and Jessie on this plantation that we're not sure of at the beginning, but we do find out. And she's wanting to kind of like reconnect with him, talk to him about what happened, you know, just like, it'll be fine, whatever. It is not fine. It's not fine. This is horror. This goes there. It was really good. There were some times there that it kind of slowed down for me. The pacing of it did, and it kind of got a little bit repetitive. By the end of this is unsettling. And if you are looking for something that is like, sometimes the horror that I read is a little bit more cosmic, a little bit more like, we're not really sure what's going on. This, You're sure. And there is shit happening on this plantation when she goes to this wedding. Ace of Spades. I gave this 3 stars, but what I will say about this is it did exactly what it wanted to do. This is a YA horror thriller book that is following our 2 main characters, Devon Richards and Chiamaka. They're up for being valedictorian, and then someone called Aces starts like sending out texts revealing some secrets about them, or saying some things about them that are meant to ruin their future and ruin their reputation. And then it like really goes there. Like, it's not just like a prank. It's not just like, oh, like our ability to get a scholarship could be ruined. Like, it's like this could be life ruining for them. What is happening to them with Aces and how people are treating them around them. They're, I believe, the only 2 Black kids at the school. So then we're also dealing with all different levels of racism, like from institutional racism to everyday to like the microaggressions that they're receiving, and then very, very clear instances of racism from the people in this school and in this town. The pacing of this was just a little bit off for me, but I will say, like, I think the pacing of this was purposeful. I really recommend especially the audiobook. I'm glad I had the audiobook for this. It was so good. Then when I was flying out to go attend VidCon, oh my god, that feels like it was a whole lifetime ago. If you don't know, I make personal finance content. That's like my actual full-time job. And I got invited out by TikTok to attend VidCon as one of their TikTok Creator Marketplace ambassadors. Oh my god, it was so much fun. But while I was in the airport, I picked up honeys, and my plan was, we all know where this is going, right? Okay. It had this little thing in it where like you can buy it, return it, and then I think you get 50% back. So the idea being that like you read it while you're on your trip, and then you return it back to the airport that you're in when you come home, and then you only paid like half price for the book to read it. It didn't quite end up happening because as much as that was such an incredible trip, there was not a second of downtime. When I tell you from like 7 a.m. to like 2 a.m., not a second of peace, which I'm so thankful for, but like there was no time to read. Okay, absolutely none. And then when I was on the plane, there were some issues. A lot of issues on my way there with my plane. Almost missed my flight. It was just a lot, so I couldn't concentrate. But anyway, I meant to read this on that trip. I did not. I read it afterward, but I'm so glad that I read this because I loved this book. This was again so close. I think I gave it like 4.5 stars, but I think that this is a book that I can still remember a lot of this plot, and I'm going to continue thinking about. And in terms of YA horror books, this is on the top. And I had a stint there where I was just reading like a lot of YA queer horror, and it was really working for me. So our main character Mars, they're trying to figure out what happened to their twin Caroline. Toward the beginning of the book, we get this scene where Caroline comes in and like tries to kill Mars. Mars is like, okay, something is going on here, okay? Something really sketchy. So there is this camp that they used to attend during the summer that something happened, Mars stopped attending, but Caroline went like every year after that. And he thinks that what happened to Caroline toward like the end of her life had to do with something that happened at this camp, and specifically something that happened with the Honeys, which is this group of girls who attend this camp, but they're kind of like off on their own. They're like their own little clique, kind of giving Bunny vibes. Okay, if you've read that by Mona Awad. They're mysterious, they're a little weird. So Mars decides that they're gonna go back to this camp, which is already kind of hard because the way that the camp is set up, it is split into like boys and girls, and Mars is gender fluid. And obviously like doesn't feel like they really are accepted and fit in there as like who they truly are. So they're struggling with that. They're trying to figure out what happened with their sister. This is like, it's got body horror, weird vibes. I think if you liked Bunny, if you liked Saw Kill Girls, Wilder Girls, those kind of vibes, you could really like this. And kind of like When the Reckoning Comes, this is a good example of having like the real life horrors of like homophobia and transphobia and patriarchal gender norms amidst horror things. And it gets so weird, dude, but I loved it. That was good. I haven't thought about that in a while. Why did I not give this 5 stars? I don't know. It just didn't feel like a 5-star. But again, I should give the caveat with all of these that maybe if I had read these at a different time in my life, maybe if I had read them before I read The Raven Cycle, maybe they would have been 5 stars. But either way, I really loved it. Then I read The Last Word by Taylor Adams. Was this a Literally Dead Book Club pick, or did I just associate it with Kayla? Either way, this is the author of No Exit, which is like a true thriller, like not a mystery thriller, just a thriller that I really loved, but I read the audiobook of it and it was like good. I was really excited about the premise of this book. So in this, it's very meta. Our main girl, Emma, who leaves a negative 1-star review on this book that she reads on her Kindle. And then maybe possibly the author is coming at her with some not happy about her review and wants to get revenge on her. But she's also like alone on this like beach house that she's staying at / taking care of, I think. So we also got this like isolated setting, and this just like, it's very meta. It has like all of the typical tropes of mystery thriller books, but I think it's done on purpose. Like, we have the unreliable female main character. Some of the twists are like, what the fuck is happening here? Okay. And I think that that's like very intentional. It was written that way to kind of be like a satire of the genre while also fitting within the genre. This is to say it's not quite what I was expecting, and it was just fine for me, but I have a feeling it's gonna be one of those that like I'm gonna forget about. I already kind of don't remember the ending. Then carrying on with my odd YA queer body horror vibe type of books, House of Hollow. This is mainly following Iris and her three sisters who they disappeared when they were younger, just like literally their parents turned their face for 2 seconds, turned back around, and they were gone off the street. And they were missing for like a month, I think. All of a sudden, they just like reappeared back on the street, but something was a little bit different about them. Hey, excuse me. No thank you. No thank you. No digging in the couch. They looked different. There was this plot point in there of them like eating but never gaining any weight. They were like always hungry, which I get it, but I don't get it. Like, I don't think it really needed to be included. And I think that's why this wasn't a 5-star for me. But they're acting strange. They're like incredibly beautiful and alluring. And it just seems like everyone around them. Hello? Oliver. Oliver, I know you see me. No, leave her alone. They're incredibly beautiful and alluring, and it just seems like they can get pretty much anyone around them to do whatever they want. But they claim to not remember anything about the time that they were gone. Their dad is like, those are not my children. Okay, I don't know what the fuck happened to my kids, but those are not them, okay? But then, years later, whenever Iris, like a main sister perspective that we get, one of her other sisters, I believe it was Gray, goes missing, and she's like, something is weird and sketch, we gotta go find her. And probably going to lead back to answers of like, what happened to them when they went missing? Where did they go? Why do they not remember anything? Why are they so different? I honestly don't know who I would recommend it to. Maybe like if you, again, kind of along the lines of Wilder Girls, Sawkill Girls, The Honeys. Maybe, but it's also a little bit different than that. Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was a little disappointed in this one. Is that a hot take? Do I have that here somewhere? I couldn't find it when I was gathering up. When I was gathering up my books, I could not find my copy of it. Here's what I will say, because we have another Riley Sager that I'm gonna talk about. I think this is a very unpopular opinion, but Riley Sager for me peaked at The House Across the Lake. And I don't think he's gonna write anything, like I don't think any of his other books are like this. I don't think he's gonna write anything like this again. And I was kind of hoping that Home Before Dark was gonna kind of give me those vibes, or his newest book was going to, and neither one of them did. And I had heard, like when I hear people talk about Riley Sager, usually Home Before Dark is like the one that they like the most. That's the one that's like most widely recommended, that people usually put at the top of the Riley Sager books that they love. And I just thought it was kind of fine. It has this like horror kind of element because it has like a haunted house element to it, but it is a mystery thriller book. And we're getting snippets of this book that the main character's like dad had written about their time that they spent in this house that he claimed is haunted. But now that she's an adult, they lived there when she was like, for a little bit when she was little. She's like, no, like none of this happened. We all know it's bullshit. But she's having to go back when her dad dies and kind of like take care of this house, fix it up, figure out what she's gonna do about it. And then some things kind of start happening and she's trying to piece together, like maybe what her dad wrote wasn't a lie. Maybe it was real. But like, why is her mom being so evasive about it? Why does no one talk about it? Why does she not really remember anything from that time? The conclusion of this to me was just like, okay, it was a fun time. I understand why people love it. I would still probably really recommend it. We're gonna talk about that more with the other Riley Sager book that I read too. But for me, it is not on a list of all-time favorite books, and it's definitely not my favorite Riley Sager book. I give it 3.5 stars. Honestly, it's probably closer to a 3. I think I just wanted to give it more than that because I wanted to feel included, if we're being honest here. Then for my local book club, I read An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This was actually a reread. I'm not gonna talk about this too much because I've already read it once. I listened to the audiobook, but this time I went through and like tabbed it and read the physical version along with it. The audiobook I think is really good in my opinion. That is how I would tell someone to consume this. I can understand why this is just kind of meh for most people, or for some people. For me, this really hit home because this is like a sci-fi YA. Is it? No, it's not YA. I keep thinking it's YA, but it's not. It's new adult. And it's like light sci-fi where we're following April May, and she lives in New York City. She's walking along, passing a Chipotle, I think, and just sees this like big statue thing that she's never seen before and just doesn't know where it came from and just kind of seems odd. So she calls up her friend and she's like, hey, come film this and we're gonna talk about it and we're gonna post about it on the internet. And she calls it Carl. And then come to find out, New York City Carl is one of many Carls, these statue things that have just like shown up out of nowhere in big cities across the world. No one knows where they came from. They can't move them. They're weird. They don't seem to be made out of material that like is known to humans. And she gets really internet famous because she was the one to kind of break, she was the face of the Carls. She broke this news. And she's kind of having to deal with the fallout of becoming internet famous, figuring out her role in all of this. I also think there's really good discussions about like, that we can really relate to, especially in the United States, of like conspiracy theorists and like Trump supporters and like the bullshit that they were peddling, especially like during the pandemic, and about like fear mongering and stuff. But for me, the parts I related so much to were the parts about like her experiencing this like internet fame. And while her internet fame is way more than mine is or will ever be, because Hank Green has that experience with the internet and being internet famous and understanding the internet and social media from that perspective, and as someone who does that as their full-time job, and as someone who like during the pandemic went from an anonymous blog to suddenly millions of people watching their videos all the time, and just like the surrealness of that and your expectations versus the reality of that life, I really enjoyed this. I already bought the second book. I need to read it. It was good. I think even the first time that I read this, it was like 3.5 stars. This time I think I gave it a 4. They're not my favorite sci-fi books by any means, but I really enjoyed them, and I just love Hank Green so much. And so I just wanted to read a Hank Green book, and we were reading it for a book club. I have not picked up the pace at all. Cool, cool, and I only have 7 minutes until I have to delete footage, and I was hoping to get through all of these books in this time, and I've only gotten through like, what, 10? Okay, next is Lone Women by Victor Lavelle. I don't know who I would recommend this to. I didn't really know what it was going into it. All I knew is that we had our main character who carries around this mysterious trunk, that she has to leave her house. She kind of has to like abandon her family farm, take this mysterious trunk with her, that it says that like anytime the trunk is open, people disappear, and we don't know what's in the trunk. I had a good time with this. I thought that I wouldn't like it as much because it is like a lot, like there's historical fiction is like the basis of it, and then there's this horror aspect to it. And I think a lot of people's complaints is how the horror was done, but something about it I liked. I was very surprised that I thought it was gonna be one of those books that we spent the whole time just kind of wondering what was in this trunk, and it just kind of being eerie and ominous, and us following our main character as she goes and tries to like settle and get her own land. It like, we find out and it goes there, and it kind of like it halfway through very much switches vibes in storytelling, but I liked it. But I don't know who I would recommend this to, because it's not for people who love historical fiction, and it's not necessarily for people who like horror. I mean, obviously it is for people who like horror, but not, I don't know what kind of horror I would place this in. I also think I had an extra level of enjoyment for this because as I was reading it, I started telling my best friend about it, and then she ended up getting invested, so I ended up like, as I was reading it, giving her play-by-plays of what was happening and telling her the whole story. And I think just that added to the experience of like getting to basically buddy read, but like she wasn't reading it with me. I just got to tell her what was happening and like get like, as things were being revealed and I was having ideas in my head of what I thought was happening, we got to talk about it, and I think that added to it. So I gave it 4.5 stars. I really liked it, but I can understand why there are mixed reviews. I'm not gonna talk about this next one for too long. Radiant Sin by Katie Robert. I might just need to admit that the magic that I felt with Neon Gods is not going to happen again with Katie Robert. I loved Neon Gods so much. I'm not typically a romance reader. Something about Neon Gods, it worked for me. It awakened something in me. It was like the first book that I had read in years, and then I ended up kind of reading some more, and I got onto like smutty TikTok book talk, and it was a whole moment in my life, and I've been trying to recreate that with other books in this like Dark Olympus series, and I just don't think anything quite hits the way that Neon Gods did, which was a Hades and Persephone retelling. This one, I couldn't even tell you, who was it? Oh, Apollo and Cassandra, and I don't know who it's supposed to be. I guess their story, I don't know if they're Greek people. But I was excited because Cassandra is fat, and I loved that we had like that fat main character in a smutty romance representation. And that part I did like, but the rest of it, like I skimmed I don't even know if I could tell you how this ended, honestly. You know, I don't go into it for the plot. Let's be honest here. But even the romance and the smut in this one just didn't feel like, it didn't hit as hard as like some of other Katie Roberts books hit for me. So I don't know. I think maybe I'll give this next one, Cruel Seduction, like one more chance, and then I'll see if maybe I just need to let that go. Because it's just like, it started with 5-star favorite book, and it's just kind of progressively gone downhill from here. I gave that one 2 stars. We'll see if I pick up any more in the series. The next one is also gonna be very quick. That is The People We Keep by Alison Larkin. I only read this because my best friend's book club was reading this book. I knew off the bat that this was not gonna be a book that I liked. But this has such great reviews. Like, so many people love this book. I don't fucking get it. I don't get it. Okay, most of the time I can hold space for like acknowledging this book wasn't for me. I can understand why people like it. I don't get it. I can understand why people like it. I don't understand how so many people give it 5 stars and absolutely fucking love it. Okay, especially after the book club, because everyone in our book club hated it too. I was so afraid I was gonna go into that book club and be amongst a bunch of women who loved this book, who don't normally read like weird kind of horror books, and I was gonna have to be like, oh. But no, none of us really liked it. I could not tell you anything about this. Like, our main character, she grows up in this town, decides she's gonna take off to try to be a musician, and she had a really, really hard childhood growing up. I think it's sold as like found family vibes, which like kind of, but not really. I liked the characters that we followed in part 1 of this book, but then we follow completely different characters throughout the rest of the book, and I hated that. I wanted to go back. Or maybe it was part 2, wherever the first city she travels to. There was a set of characters that I really loved. I wanted more of that. It just felt like everything that was happening in this book, she wrote it to be like, huh? Oh, are you feeling something now? Like, oh, is this gonna make you cry? Is this gonna make you feel something? I'm trying to make you feel something. And I was like, no, I don't feel anything. It just feels like you're writing this for like the shock value. I also was not a huge fan of the queer representation in this book. I was excited that there was queer rep, and we had a lot of like side characters who were queer, but then the more that the book went on, something about the way it was written felt like very stereotypical, very like put in there just to have the representation. And then every single character who was queer had an abusive partner, and that felt not grand to me. So this was just not for me. I gave it a generous 2-star, but I'm gonna be honest with you, it was a 1. Next was Jackal by Aaron E. Adams, and this was when I started realizing I haven't read a 5-star in a bit, friends. Things are not looking great for me, okay? We gotta turn this ship around, because I was really struggling with like wanting to pick up a book. I didn't know what I wanted to read. I don't even know how I got on to deciding that this was gonna be the book that I was reading, but I got the ebook and the audiobook from my library, and I did really like this. This is like a mystery horror. There's not a lot of like thrilling aspects to it, and I can understand why people don't like it, but I don't really understand why it has such a low rating. Kind of a similar premise to When the Reckoning Comes, that our main character Liz is going back to her hometown because her best friend is getting married. So I had to replace the battery, and then I filmed for a little while, and then I had to replace it again, and then footage between that time and last time, just, it's gone. So then I think where I left off was I picked up the next Riley Sager book that I read this month, which was the only one left. I picked this up for the Literally Dead book club, but I would have picked it up anyway because I wanted it to be like The House Across the Lake, okay? I wanted those vibes. I was hoping he would go there again. I understand why people love this. Let me just say right off the bat, this is gonna be one of my most highly recommendable mystery thriller books. The way that he does the twist, there are so many of them that I feel like even if you know some of them, you're gonna be surprised by things. The pacing is really well done. This is objectively a really easy to recommend mystery thriller book. It just didn't do quite what I wanted it to do, and I just have a feeling that maybe the magic I felt reading one of the lowest rated Riley Sager books is not going to happen again, which I understand. I get it. And I'm happy for everyone who really loved this book, and I'm happy for Riley. Quick synopsis if you don't know what this is about. Our main character Kit is an like at-home caregiver. Something happened in her past where she was almost fired, but she wasn't. Her boss basically wants to fire her, but instead he's like, okay, no, you can go take care of Lenora Hope, which Lenora Hope, back in like the 20s, I think this is set in the 70s or 80s, she possibly murdered her entire family. She was never convicted, okay, but there was some things, it was suspicious. Okay, her entire family died in this house on top of this cliff, and she was there and no one knows exactly what happened. And if it wasn't her, then who was it? So Kit, though, also has some dark things going on in her past. Is she responsible? Who knows? So she goes to take care of Lenora, and Lenora's really only way of communicating is like tapping yes or no, or Kit figures out that she can type on a typewriter. And Lenora's like, I want to tell you exactly what happened. Kit's like, okay, I don't know if I want to know, but because like you could be dangerous and you could have murdered her entire family, but also I kind of want to know. And it's also set in this like isolated setting where they're on this house that's like literally falling apart on top of this cliff, and some shit is going down. Okay. The more I talk about it, like, this was good. If you love mystery thriller books and you've liked Riley Sager in the past, or you want to pick up a Riley Sager to try, even though they weren't my most favorites, Home Before Dark and The Only One Left is probably going to be the two I would recommend. Are probably going to be the two I would recommend. Then I went to Fat Camp, not the bad kind of fat camp, the great kind of fat camp, where it is just like this retreat that you're surrounded by people who just love their bodies and take up space, and it's like body positivity all around, and I loved it. It was so healing. Absolutely loved it. Already bought tickets so that I can go next year. But while I was there, one of my friends recommended reading Dumplin'. And this is a YA book about our main character who is a fat girl whose mom would like won her town's beauty pageant in the past and now helps run it every year. And she lives in this small southern town and it's like the beauty pageant is their big thing. And she decides one year that she is going to compete, which is very not the norm. And I just loved it. It was so healing for like the inner child in me that was so afraid to take up space and so afraid to be myself. I loved it. If that is what you need in this life, the audiobook was great. It was an easy read, but I wish that I had read this when I was like 16, honestly. Next, again with like trying to recreate, I thought maybe nostalgia would get me to a 5-star. Okay, so then I was like, maybe what I used to always do is I would go to Barnes & Noble like before Goodreads was a thing or BookTube or anything like that and just like scroll sit amongst the books and pick out books based on the cover and the synopsis and decide on like the one book I was gonna bring home, where like I had never seen any reviews or ratings on this book. I didn't know anything about it, but that's how I found most of the books that I read as a teenager. And I was like, maybe I can recreate that magic. Go into Barnes & Noble, try to pick out a book that like I haven't heard of before that I'm just picking out based on cover and vibes and like sitting down and reading. I would like get stacks of book and read like the first chapter of all of them and figure out which one I wanted to read from there. And from that, I got The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, which is a YA fantasy book that has queer representation. We're following Florian and Evelyn, our two main characters. Florian became part of this pirate ship when they were little, basically out of the need to survive. Evelyn is a princess who's getting like shipped off, basically sold off to her husband, and it's like customary for women to like travel to their husbands with their casket. So she's on this boat getting shipped off to her future husband, who she's never met before, with her casket that Florian and their crew is on. And little does she know that the pirates plan on like taking over the ship and enslaving all of the people on the ship. That becomes an issue because Florian and Evelyn get close and it's like, okay, I don't want her to die, but like I also don't want to die. And there's mermaids, obviously. There's witches, obviously. I thought that this was a standalone. It is not. But either way, I thought it was good and I gave it 4 stars. Then again, trying to build up this feelings of nostalgia, I ththought maybe what I need is a middle grade fantasy series. Now, I thought this was middle grade, but maybe this is like YA. Maybe it's like middle grade to YA. Because I think she's like 12, right? This is in the YA section at Barnes & Noble. I thought it was middle grade. I think it could be either one of those. Anyway, not the point. Akata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor is following our main character, Sunny, who she is from New York, but now lives in Nigeria where her family is from, and never really feels like she fits in. She's albino, and she's just trying to like find her way in this community. And little does she know, she discovers that she might have some magical powers. And I love the magic in this book because it's like part of the magic is that it takes these parts of us that like as humans in society we often see as flaws or wrong or different or weird. And that those things about us make us unique and special and make our magic unique and special and often more powerful. And I just loved that so much. But then against this backdrop, like we have her figuring out that she has magical powers, her friends kind of helping her along the way to discover what that means, how to use them. And then we also have this like mystery because kids in her town are going missing and slash dead, I think, presumably to this like serial killer that they have not been able to catch yet. And maybe her and her friends are gonna have to do that. I gave it a 3.5 stars, but I would round it up on 4 on Goodreads, and I'm definitely gonna continue in the series. At this point, where are we at in my journey? We started this off in May. This would have been around, oh, like a couple weeks ago, August. Had yet to find a 5-star read, and I was like, okay, we're pulling out the big guns. We're going for a book written by an author that I know that I've given 5 stars to before and I would like consider an all-time favorite. And that would be Olive Blake, Masters of Death. This I got in Barnes & Noble like the day it came out, and I was so excited about it. I like happened to stumble across it and I was like, oh my god, I need to read this. I read One for My Enemy earlier in the year. The Atlas 6 and the Atlas Paradox are like some of my favorite books. Alone with You in the Ether is definitely one of my favorite books of this year. Her writing is pretentious. The love that is depicted in there is not always healthy, but it just feels real. You could argue that nothing happens in her books. You'd probably be right, but I absolutely eat that shit up, okay? So the premise of this is that we're following the godson of death, who is also a medium, but maybe not a real one. And then we also are following a vampire. We got angels and demons and lots of other magical creatures. And then there's like this immortality game that like immortals play. That's pretty much all I can tell you about the plot. We got a queer love story. If you like other Olive Blake books, I think that you'll really like this. If you can like her style of writing, I think that this will work for you. It's not gonna work for everyone, I totally get that. I really loved it. It wasn't quite a 5-star, and maybe that's just because it's not fair, because it's her and I had certain expectations, and maybe if I read this at a different time, yada yada yada. But either way, this was nice for me because even though it wasn't that 5-star and I was a little disappointed about that, it was the first book I read in a while that like I didn't want to put down and that I was excited to read and that like I wanted to tab and highlight and stuff, which was very healing for me. I needed that win. Next, there is a lot of vlog footage, it exists, of me reading this book that I don't think will ever see the light of day. And that is Fourth Wing. So here's the thing, is that I went into this expecting that I was either going to absolutely love it 5-star or I was gonna absolutely hate it 1-star. And then if I hated it, I'd be able to do a rant review. If I absolutely loved it, it'd be a fun time because this isn't like normally something I would expect to love. But I was hoping that again, playing on that nostalgia, that like this would give me the vibes of Twilight because I was a Twilight girly, okay? I fucking loved Twilight. So I know that I can love books that objectively I can say now are not the best plotting or writing or relationship examples. And that's what I thought like maybe this was gonna be, and maybe for whatever reason it was just gonna work. Because let me tell you, I have never seen ratings like this. What? There was like, the last time I checked, like 330,000 ratings, and it was like the highest rated book on my TBR. Everyone was giving this a 5-star, but then I go on my YouTube and if I type in Fourth Wing, my entire feed of like people who I follow is filled with like 1-star rant reviews. But the thing with that vlog is that at the end of it, it was just kind of like, I probably had the most unpopular opinion of all because I was like, yeah, I get it. If you loved it, I get it. If you hated it, I get it. I think objectively this is not well written. Like, there are so many plot holes. There are so many times that the dialogue is so fucking cringe. The way that the relationship dynamics are written, it's like insta-lust. What is happening here? Why are you pining over these guys when you were literally fighting to your death? But I get it. Like, something about it also works. And I love books like this because I love that this is getting so many people into reading or back into reading that like, how can you complain about something that is able to do that? I get how you can, but like, I also think that there's a lot of merit in the fact that this is doing something really magical by getting people to really fall back in love with reading. And I think that's totally valid. If you fucking hated this and thought it was a waste of your time and you're so pissed at all those 5-star reviews, I also get it. So then by the end of the vlog, I was like, what is the point here? Like, I didn't feel like I had anything new to really add. Everything that I felt had already been said by one side or the other. Oh, what is this? I'm glad that you asked. Dragons? Our main girl, she wants to be a scribe, and then her mom is in like the dragon army and she's like, nah bitch, you're gonna go compete, you're gonna go to this like academy where basically you either bond with a dragon or you die. Good luck. Oh, and everyone else who is at this academy is there voluntarily and has been training their entire lives for it. You are there forcefully voluntarily, and you've only been training for 6 months. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. But like, we know it's gonna be fine, right? Okay. And then also there's like this enemies to lovers romance kind of vibes. And it's smutty, it's new adult. But I thought the main plot twist in this was like so cheesy and cheap, but I get why people love it. And with all of this being said, I did pre-order the second book in the series. So had I known that the second book was gonna come out so soon, I probably would have just waited to read this. But I thought it was gonna be like normal where you have to wait like a year or two, but this came out in like May and the next book's like out next month, which does make me a little bit nervous because I thought, okay, maybe by the second book, she'll have like gone through this process. It'll have some more time to get edited and like maybe some of those plot holes that we were seeing won't exist. I'm feeling a little less confident in that, but let me just say, I get it. Okay, whatever you feel, I gave it a 3-star, it's fine. And apparently I am carrying on in the series, so here we go. Then for my local book club, I read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I really thought that this was gonna be a 5-star read. I liked this. It wasn't what I was expecting it was going to be, but it was enjoyable. I gave it a 3.5 star. The audiobook experience was really nice. I will say, like, this is a horror book. Let me back it up. The title says it all, okay? Southern housewives in the like 80s, 90s who have this, like, they start off, they have this book club, it's like a little bit pretentious, and then some of them break off and they're like, we're gonna read like true crime books. Okay, you wanna join? And then they get like obsessed with like Ted Bundy and like all of these other true crime things that have happened. And then one of them is like, I think that this new guy that moved into town, not good. I think something has happened in here that's a little strange and I think he's coming after his kids, and she thinks maybe he's a drug dealer, but as we know, based off of the title, he's not a drug dealer, he's a vampire. They are kind of left with like children that find them annoying as fuck and they can never do anything right in their eyes, and husbands who are misogynistic and don't believe in a single word that they say and think that they should just like sit down and shut up and cook and clean and be a good housewife. And no one believes them when they're like, something is coming after our kids. So like, I have to take this into my own hands. There was a scene in this book. It has something to do with insects. And here's the thing, is that the idea of an insect nesting itself into my body, getting into one of my orifices, is literally one of my biggest fears. And I was like cleaning up around the house while I was listening to the audiobook of the scene, and I had to like stop what I was doing. And I verbally was like, nope, nope, like I felt it. And that was pretty good, okay? It takes a lot for me to feel things like that so viscerally, especially with audiobooks. I gave it a 3.5 star. I wanted it to be a 5 star. It just, the pacing of it and how the horror itself played out wasn't quite what I was expecting, but I did really love those conversations. Like, there were so many conversations on like misogyny and racism and who we believe and women. And you know, I love women. So for that, it was good. Then I read Leech again for Kayla's book club, but this one wasn't the Literally Dead book club. This was her besties book club. I want to go back and reread this. I think I did this a disservice because I forgot about that book club until like 2 days before it was happening, and then I was like in a rush to read this, and I think that this could have been a 5 star if I consumed it a little bit differently. And I honestly think it's still a book that now, having read it, I could go back through and reread, and it could potentially be a 5 star upon reread. I think I gave it like I originally was thinking a 3, then during the live show I think I bumped it up to a 4 like after talking about it with everyone. This is so hard to explain. It is horror, but it's also mainly sci-fi. When we start off the book, we're following our main character, who is part of the Institute, part of this collective consciousness. The only doctors in this world. What everyone else doesn't know, talk to each other and they share all of each other's experiences and memories and stuff, finds this like parasite. One of them has died. And it was so weird, but such a good time. God, I feel, what am I saying? I don't know how else to describe it other than the fact that if you like weird sci-fi horror shit, honestly, I would give this a try. And if you DNF'd it, I almost did. I would have DNF'd it had it not been for the book club. I'm so glad that I didn't. I don't know how I feel about the audiobook. In some ways, I feel like it added to it. In some ways, it was a little bit hard to keep up with. And I think that maybe that ended up bringing down my enjoyment and understanding of what was going on. Try it out. Then I started filming a vlog, which may or may not see the light of day, we'll see, about trying to find a 5-star read. I was like, okay, maybe I can manifest this shit, because it's been too long. Okay, it's been 4 months at this point. I need a 5-star read. I read The Collective. Maybe this was a mistake, thinking this was gonna be a 5 star, but here's the thing is I've gone through so much work trying to get this book. Okay, there was like 3 times that I tried to buy a copy of this book and something happened where it didn't make its way to me. And the synopsis of this sounds like right up my fucking alley. It's like about moms whose kids have died and then they decide to seek revenge and they like get together and start fucking shit up. Yes, please. But that's not what this is. Like, I will say I read this so fast. Like, you can fly through this. And it's kind of mixed media in the sense of like we're getting messages that this mom is like, because she really, most of this happens like via chat on the dark web with other moms. But like we don't get to experience a lot of like the thriller. This isn't really a mystery. It's also not really a thriller because any thrilling element that happens in this book happens off page. And then the ending? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Diabolical, okay? Menace behavior on the author's part. Generous 2-star. Not the best way to start off 5-star reading vlog, nor was this next book, which I would also put on one of my most disappointing reads of the year. And that would be She Is a Haunting. I'm so sad about this. I paid full price for this book, okay? It says 25% off. She didn't take 25% off. I paid full price and then I was too embarrassed to say, hey, isn't that supposed to be 25% off? So I was like, whatever, I'll just pay for it, it's fine. When it first came out, because I thought I'm gonna come home and read this and absolutely love it. This is everything that I was loving in queer, YA, body horror vibes, except we've also got like a haunted house, like an actual haunted house vibe. Come on. Like, what more could I possibly want? We're following Jade as she is going back to Vietnam because she needs money for college. And her dad's like, fine, I'll pay for your college if you come help me fix up this like bed and breakfast. She hasn't talked to her dad in a long time. Her dad kind of like pieced out when she was younger and she's like, fucking fine, okay? I'll go spend like a few weeks there. And then some like weird things start happening while she's at this house, but like no one is believing her. And we've got like some sapphic vibes going on. I think it must have just been the writing style. I don't know. It's a debut author, so I would possibly read from her again, but it all just felt very surface level and like the pacing of this was really weird. And it was like, I would start questioning like, oh, did I miss something? Because it was like all of a sudden a scene that should have happened, it was like it had happened, but it didn't. And I go back through and try to read and I'm like, no, I didn't miss that. Like it's just presumed to have happened. And again, you could argue that that's because this is YA, but I don't think you could because I didn't feel that way about like The Honeys or House of Hollow. And I'm so sad because this is one of my most anticipated books of the year. I already forgot how this book ended and I really just wanted it to be done. Like I was listening to it on like 3 times speed because I knew halfway through that like this was not it. I gave that one a 2-star, but I was so disappointed. Like I really wanted to love that. So then I went for, this was right before I got sick. I was sick for like 2 weeks. Oh, it knocked me out. Whoa, I haven't been that sick since I was like 16 and I had mono for a month. But right before that, I think I didn't realize I was getting sick and I was just feeling a lot of things. I was feeling really sad. I just needed to sit in my sadness and I thought that's what I was gonna get from anxious people. In my defense, I didn't know anything about this. Well, not in my defense, I guess in the book's defense. I didn't know anything about this other than the fact that I thought I had seen like some reviews, maybe from like Katie, that were talking about how this just like felt like being human. That's what I wanted, is I just wanted a book that got it. That sometimes being a human sucks, but like there's also beauty in it. And that is what this is, but it's against a very different backdrop than I was expecting. So this is following a group of strangers who end up in an accidental hostage situation after a bank robbery gone wrong. So like the main bank robber didn't mean to take these people hostage. And these people are like the worst group of hostages ever. And it's really a character study. Like there's not a lot of plot in this. It's just going through and figuring out like, who are these people? How are they connected? How did they end up in this apartment in this accidental hostage situation together? How does it all come like full circle? What is going on here? There are like some twists and turns and reveals. They're nothing that you would ever guess because just like shit gets revealed out of fucking nowhere. And it is more lighthearted and there are times that like made me laugh, and there are quotes in this that were so good. Like it says, sometimes it hurts, it really hurts, for no other reason than the fact that our skin doesn't feel like it's ours. Anyone who loves someone has had those desperate nights where we lie awake trying to figure out how we can afford to carry on being human beings. Sometimes that makes us do things that seem ridiculous in hindsight, but which felt like the only way out at the time. And like our hearts are bars of soap that we keep losing hold of. The moment we relax, they drift off and fall in love and get broken, all in the wink of an eye. Like these things that I'm like, oh my God, yes. Like you feel that. And even though this was not at all what I was expecting and not the vibe that I thought I was getting into when I first got into it, I ended up going along for the ride. I gave this 4 stars. It was really good. It was just, I just expected something different, but I think either way, I liked this. I'm excited to read more from Frederick Bachman, and it was unlike anything that I've ever read before, which I enjoyed. We are getting so close, friends. Stay with me. Oh, we are on the horizon. So then, like I said, I was really sick for like 2 weeks and I didn't read anything except for one thing. I wanted something on my Kindle and I read The Last Quintista, and this was again a situation of not at all what I thought it was going into it. I thought that this was a middle grade fantasy that was gonna kind of be more like magical, whimsical. Our main girl, something ends up happening and she ends up having to be like the last person to like tell the history of like her culture and in some form of magic way. Which, yes and no, it's not fantasy, it was sci-fi. It was like futuristic sci-fi where Halley's Comet is coming and it's going to destroy the entire world. And we know that it's coming, so a select group of people have been picked to board these ships where they're gonna travel for like 300 years in like, I don't know what they call it, cryostasis, sleep, to a new planet to try to like keep humanity going and redo our life on a different planet. And everyone else is getting left behind. Some things go wrong on her journey there and she ends up being the only remaining human who remembers Earth. And it's kind of put on her shoulders to survive, to help the other people around her survive, and to help them remember their humanity and what it was like on Earth and figure out how they're going to carry on. A lot of this takes place in the spaceship, which I wasn't expecting. We do see the like new world that they travel to, but a lot of this is very insular and we're in her mind and as she is just trying to figure out how to carry on, and she got a lot on her shoulders. It was good, it just wasn't at all what I was expecting, but as far as like middle grade books go, really highly recommendable. I really loved it. I gave it a 4 star. I've been having like decent luck with middle grades recently. I haven't found that 5-star one, but a lot of ones that I really would recommend. On the opposite end, okay, it's gotta get worse before things get better. A Twisted Love Story. Again, I read this for Kayla's book club, Literally Dead book club. Thank God for that, because it's the one thing that kind of kept me coming back to reading over these last few months when things were looking grim. Oh my God. Okay, here's the thing, is that I read this all via audiobook. I'm so glad. I kept going back and forth with myself. I was like, should I buy a hard copy of this? I've DNF'd a Samantha Downing book before. I DNF'd For Your Own Good, which is one that like people really love. And this is a new one. It was gonna be like $20 to buy the hardcover. I don't even really like reading physical hardcover books. The Kindle book itself was like $18, but my library had the audiobook. and I was like, I'll just play Candy Crush. I was getting over being sick and I'll listen to this. I'm so glad that I did not spend my money on this book. Holy shit, it was so bad. But like, I'm not upset about it because I had so much fun ranting about it in the live show with people. What happened in this book? Like, there was no point. I don't understand how this was written. I don't understand how this passed an editor and publishing. I don't understand what happened. So we're following like our main characters. Don't tell me to tell you their names because I don't remember. That went in one ear and out the other. They've had like a tumultuous relationship for the last like decade. I think in the vlog that I was filming for this, I might have spoiled it because I just thought it was like, I thought the twist was so fucking obvious from the beginning that I thought we were all supposed to just know it, but I guess maybe not. Maybe it's supposed to be a twist. So I'm gonna be careful about how I talk about this. At one point in the relationship, something happened and maybe someone got hurt or there's some things that they have to answer to. It was not thrillery because nothing happened on page. There wasn't really a mystery. The characters made no sense. But listen, we had to go through that. You ready for it? Okay, if you're still here, you have earned this moment. We've earned this moment. Over 4 months of me just I literally got to the point while I was filming that 5-star reading vlog, I was like, maybe it's just not gonna happen for me anymore. Maybe reading looks different for me now. Maybe I'm not gonna have those feelings that I used to have. I need to maybe accept that. Maybe I just need to reread a favorite book of mine. I was like really having an existential crisis on reading and like what it meant for me now. And then in a desperate hope, I was afraid to pick this book up because I was like, if it's just me right now, I'm gonna ruin the chance that this book has to be magical for me, but I've gotta give it a shot. And oh friends, it paid off. The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. The blurb on this from B.E. Schwab says, it is like being wrapped up in a big gay blanket, simply perfect. And that is exactly how I would describe this book. I loved this from start to end. The characters in this, the found family vibes, the queerness, the love, the quotes, the vibes, everything about this was exactly like, it's what I have been missing from reading. That feeling of falling in love with the book and the characters and reading and the prose and feeling seen and heard. That was all wrapped up in this book and I've already recommended it to so many people and I am just so fucking thankful for this book and so glad that I read this. 5 stars in case I didn't say that. Obviously. And it restored just like so much hope. If you don't already know what this is about, this is following our main character, Linus, and he is kind of like a social worker for the department in charge of magical youth. And he gets assigned to go to this house kind of out in the middle of nowhere in the Cerulean Sea that is supposed to house like the world's most like dangerous children. To check in on this, see if like how the house is running, see if it's safe, see if they need to shut it down. He's like spent 15 years in the same position, always played by the rules, very much a rule follower, has empathy for kids, but like never really questions what happens to them like after he sees them and checks in on them. And like he's sometimes in charge of like shutting down these orphanages. And it's set in this world where like there's humans and then there's magical people, and the magical people have to be registered, and the magical kids are often put into these like houses to like keep them safe from other people in themselves and bullshit, okay? It starts off with him like being a little apathetic about everything and very set in his ways. And then of course he goes here and he just meets all of these kids and Arthur, who is the one who is like helping to run this house and take care of these kids. And I just loved this. I think Talia and Chauncey are my 2 favorite characters, but honestly, I loved so many of them. What a fucking way. Like, not only did we have a 5-star, we had like a top favorite of the year. Like, I will always remember this book. I'm going to recommend it so vastly, and I knew I was gonna love it, but part of me was just afraid that like maybe I'd overhyped it in my mind. So I read that only a few days ago, but there's actually been a couple of more books that I'm just gonna go over quickly that I have read since then. And I am happy to say that things are going a lot better now. I think maybe we broke the curse, the slumpy slump, hopefully. The first thing that I picked up was Station 11. I actually found this at my thrift store the other day. I was so excited about it. This was not what I was expecting. I had already read, why do I keep forgetting the name of this book? Sea of Tranquility. I keep thinking it's How High We Go in the Dark, but that's not. Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. And that was the book that she wrote after this book that's kind of like meta and based on this. So this was a book about the pandemic, but written before the pandemic actually happened. It's a fiction book about like a flu pandemic and what happens when the world kind of shuts down. And it's on a much bigger scale than like what we saw, but it follows, it's very character based. There's not like a lot of plot to, there's a little bit of plot to this, but it's more following a handful of people. Switching timelines between like before the like days leading up to the pandemic versus now afterward, and the after effects and what humanity is like, and just so many good moments in here. And I would be so interested to hear the perspective of someone who read this pre-2020 and like now maybe like rereading it after. I think this was a good time for me to read it. We're removed enough from that initial situation that we've got a little bit of hindsight on it. Obviously this isn't supposed to be a guess on what it would actually be like. It's a fictionalized version of it. But I thought it was really good. I thought it was gonna be 5 stars. I ended up giving it a 4. The last half of this was 5 stars. Like absolutely incredible. It was a little bit slow there for me at the beginning. It was more character based and I didn't love all of the characters the way that I thought that I would, but the way that it all kind of like wrapped up at the end made it for me. Then actually last night I had just gotten done reading Station 11 and I was sitting on the couch and I didn't want to get up because all of the cats were like cuddled with me and it was so comfy, and so I didn't want to get up to like come pick out like my next read. So instead I had happened to have The Need sitting there, which I knew nothing about other than the fact that I'd heard Kayla from Books and Lala talk about this and say like she doesn't recommend it. I think she said if you liked like Leave the World Behind and Bunny and like maybe one other book that I really liked, Cabin at the End of the World, maybe you could like this, but like that she loved it but she didn't necessarily recommend it. And that is my cue. Okay, when Kayla loves something but wouldn't necessarily recommend it, I take that as a direct recommendation for myself, not holding her to it, okay? But like that's usually a good cue that I might actually really like it. So I didn't know anything about this, I just went into it for the vibes and I'm so fucking glad I did. I don't want to say much about this, mainly because I also would not recommend it, because I don't know who the fuck I would recommend this to. It has such low reviews on Goodreads and I get it. I think it's classified as horror, not really. I don't know what it would be though, because it's not really mystery thriller either, and it's not really lit fic or science fiction. And I don't know how much I can say about this that it's not a spoiler. From the very beginning of this, I was vibing. It slowed down a little bit there for me at the end. Nothing makes sense. The ending was like, what the fuck just happened? Like, why did I just read this? But I stayed up. I started reading this and I figured I would read like 20 or 30 pages and then kind of like nod off. My sleep schedule has been weird since I've been sick. I stayed up until 6 a.m. and finish this entire book. And I do think if you're gonna read it in one sitting. And just commit to it. Commit to not knowing what the fuck is going on. Don't read it, but if you are going to read it, that is how I would recommend it. And I would recommend going into it not knowing anything, because it was just a wild time. And even though that's infuriating, because I feel like I've told you absolutely nothing about this book, that's where I'm gonna leave it. And here we are. Oh my god, I've been filming for like 3 hours. Editing Lexa is gonna hate me, but that's fine, because we have recapped what a whirlwind roller coaster of a ride these last 4 months of my reading have been. So if you are here until the very end, let me just say hello, hi. If you're not already subscribed, come on. You made it this far. Something about us is working, okay? But also, leave a little house emoji down in the comments so I know that you made it all the way to the end, because you made it to this moment. We deserve to sit in this moment together. Let me know what some of your favorite and least favorite books of the last month or recently have been. Thank you all so much for watching. I can't believe if anyone has made it all the way to the end of this, but I had such a good time talking about all of these books. Hopefully now we can get back into the swing of things. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!